Well, welcome to today's class on pandemics and other emergencies. And this is going to be a lesson in preparedness and a discussion about fear and how you can learn to be not afraid. So I'm Dr. Mary Brown. I'm a traditional naturopath. I love sharing natural remedies with people because they work. They've been around for thousands of years, and there is a plethora of remedies that God has presented on this earth to help us in a variety of situations. And we will go through some of those today. So how well prepared one is for an emergency can determine your feeling of self-confidence, ability to survive in a crisis, and a whole lot more. In this country, we've become quite complacent. We go to the grocery store when we need to. We stock up on things and nilly-willy, and we really have not given a whole lot to preparedness. Unless you live like in a place, maybe in California, there are more people that think about preparedness because of earthquakes, and now they're going through these fires. Maybe in Louisiana where they have flooding, maybe in Florida where there's hurricanes. But here in Michigan, even though we have tornadoes and we lose electricity sometimes in the winter, I would say the greater portion of Michiganders don't even consider what happens when the lights go out. And so hopefully you can pass this information on and share this video with others, become a community of preppers, people not afraid of disaster, but preparing so that they have food on their shelves, they have an emergency first aid kit so that they can handle some of the things that happen during emergencies. Just a century ago, diseases like smallpox, typhoid, cholera, dysentery, diphtheria, scarlet fever, yellow fever, and tuberculosis, or known as consumption back then, were rampant in cities in Europe and North America. In 1900, the three leading causes of death were influenza and pneumonia, tuberculosis, both lung-related conditions, and gastrointestinal infections. Back then, I love to fantasize about the 1900s, and I love watching movies about that. But personally, I wouldn't want to live back then. The sanitation was terrible. If you lived in a frontier area, you had to deal with horse droppings. In fact, that's one of the reasons why when you go into a department store, the first department that you run into is the perfume department, because they knew that people were going to track in this awful smell, and to overcome it, they introduced you to the perfume area. The last place you went to was the restaurant. So it was always the farther end of the store. And most big department stores are like that still. We have improved. We no longer use horses for transportation. We have better air quality, mostly, sometimes not. But sanitary conditions have improved greatly. There were no public bathrooms, so there was that. Gastrointestinal infections were huge during that time and still are, but for an unrelated situation that we may go into later. So improved sanitation played a huge role in the decline of these infectious diseases. Now, those people that promote vaccines will always relate to the fact that it was the vaccine. But just as now, COVID is way down in deaths and they're trying to make a vaccine. So if you look at the numbers, the vaccine was never the instrumental part of a disease like these infectious diseases to go away. It was knowledge about sanitation. It was correcting your diet. It was refrigeration and understanding about food spoilage. It was the transportation changed, so we no longer had animal feces everywhere. Water purification systems were put in, and since then, they now create their own concern, like with fluoride and chlorine, but they played a big part in dropping down the incidence rate of these diseases. Now, this is an interesting chart. It was, you can find it on the internet. And if you look at, let me see if I can annotate that better. Okay, so if you look at this big spike, what happened between 1917 and 1920, basically, what created that huge spike? Well, let's look at what happened during that time. Whoops, let me go back. So the 1918 war, look at how the conditions these people had to live in. There was no sanitation. There was crowded conditions. Their morale was depleted. So the vaccinations that they did give them were brand new, and they had dubious risk assessment done on them. This Alma Wright had tested a wholesale pneumococcal vaccine in South Africa gold miners in 1911, and this was what they used. So manufacturers had developed and sold various mixed heat-killed bacterial stock vaccines of dubious usefulness. They knew that they had mixed results, and yet they gave it to these guys to what they thought would be to protect them. But since 94% of those infected were soldiers, was it the vaccine? You know, that's questionable, but we have such a strong pharmaceutical presence that if anybody does do any kind of research that shows it could have been that, it's discredited. So I think that it was a combination of things, that they lowered their natural resistance by this vaccine entering the body, that they had horrible conditions that they lived in, the stress of the war, the bombs going off, running for your life, seeing a dear friend lose his life, or bits and parts of him being lost. So it was a terrible situation. So how does that compare to what today was? Well, now this is something I found quite interesting. 2019, 2020 COVID and the 7th CISM military games. Now, we know that this virus began in Wuhan. Did you know that in Wuhan, in October of 2019, from the 18th through the 27th, there was called the CISM Military World Games. And these were over 9,000, almost 10,000 athletes participated. Now, you know that the stands were crowded, that each one of these other people weren't counted in this 9,000. There were performers that weren't included in this 9,000. There might have been millions of people that were in Wuhan at the time. We also suspect that the virus escaped from this fourth grade facility, which was working on making a bat virus into a human acceptable virus. So these athletes came from 100 countries. So people say, how did it get so global? Well, I'm just putting it out there that maybe this could be one of the mysteries solved. You do your own research and investigation, but why the fear? So a reporter asked an Amish man, why is it that no one in his community of hundreds of people had COVID in spite the fact that nobody did this physical distancing and nobody wore masks? And the Amish guy replied, probably because we don't watch TV or listen to the radio or subscribe to social media. So, you know, how much of this is made up? Emotions are contagious. So, you know yourself that if you're on a roller coaster and people next to you are screaming, that elevates your excitement, that dynamic is present throughout. Also, if you're watching a funny film, that humor is contagious. So emotions are contagious. So what do we do about reducing fear? So the research says, don't jump to conclusions. So that was one of the first things that I thought was thoughtful. Now this was a novel virus. People didn't know much about it. So when they found out that it was similar in response to a cold, that it liked to go up into the mucus membranes and kind of reproduce inside there, we had more information about it. We knew that it could, that it was through the air, that you could spew this through the air. But what people don't realize is that viruses are extremely small, and these masks do not stop the propulsion of the virus. Some of the virus will stay in the mask, but some of it will go forward and just be on the air. And so they felt that social distancing, but there is no scientific evidence that at 5 feet and 11 inches, the virus drops off so that you're safe at 6 feet. There's nothing in science that proves that to be true. In fact, there's some thing on the CDC that 3 feet is sufficient. So who do you believe about things like that? It's just all suspect. So keep present in your observations of the situation. Keep looking at things and try not to get into the mob mentality of fear. Get within yourself and figure out, does that really make sense? Is that logical? So you need to understand the disease and what you personally can do about it. There's lots of things that we understand about being sick. many of us have experienced it in some form or another. Somebody has had either a cold or the flu or both at some time, maybe more often than others. And you understand what to do about it. You stay home, basically. You drink fluids and you do what you need to do to help your body get strong again. So it's just common sense. You do not mask the healthy. That makes no sense to me because you need oxygen and plenty of it. So having emergency supplies such as first aid kits, food storage, and other supplies, we're going to talk a bit about that and maybe help you to get better prepared for whatever comes up. You won't be afraid of a second wave or what will this winter bring. I'm going to talk a little bit about distress remedy because I think every family should at least have one bottle of distress remedy on hand and learn about some other remedies. There's so many wonderful YouTube videos out there about foraging for remedies that are free. And then I want to talk to you about faith. You know, everybody has a belief system. Now, you either believe there's going to be a disaster, you're going to believe you're going to succumb to something, or you believe that you're going to be okay, that you have a personal relationship with God and you know how to pray and get answers by going within. You know, we have the God within us. Each and every one of us. You may not call it God. Maybe you call it Supreme Being. Maybe you call it Allah. Whatever. There is a God-like presence within each of us. I'm Catholic. And we were trained in second and third grade that we were made in the image and likeness of God. Well, if we are made in the image and likeness of God, why wouldn't God give us the tools to protect our bodies? Think about it. So train yourself not to panic and lose your head like this poor guy. So distress remedy. Look at all the wonderful ingredients in distress. Now, flower essences are made in a special way. They're made first thing in the morning, and you put the bloom in a dish of distilled water, and the sun takes the spiritual essence of that bloom and puts it into the water. And then there's many things you can read on the internet how flower essences are made. But look at now, rock rose eases panic, terror, and deep fears. So there are a lot of people that could use this. Maybe you want to put some drops in their drinking water or something. But, you know, you need to calm, get reasonable. Then there is red clover, which aids being calm and self-centered amid group panic or hysteria. There are people in Oregon, I just would love to like air spray this whole area because they are so involved in this mob mentality and hysteria about destruction and in this energy just kind of is, it takes over. This energy takes over. And in the time when Christ was to be crucified, and Pontius Pilate said, offered him Barabbas or Christ, and they said Barabbas. There were crowd influences. There were people in the crowd shouting Barabbas. And that's the same thing that's happening with this Black Lives Matter situation. There are people in the crowd driving the emotion and driving the violence. And they don't have anything about protecting Black lives. It's all about destruction and overwhelming the situation. So keep a calm head. Think logically. Don't succumb to the emotion of what's going on. This is a fabulous remedy. It is simply taken by dropperful. Children can take it. I've put it on the feet of newborn infants, the bottoms of their feet, and that it can be absorbed into their things. So like newborns that have gone through some trauma, it works fabulous for them. Seniors who don't know what's going on and why they can't get their relatives to visit them, they don't understand why they're so lonely. Do you know that the suicide rate has escalated 30%? Now, there has been very little risk benefit assessment done by these governors that keep us locked down, that keep us from doing our job. They are not looking at the ramifications. We know that the vulnerable are those people that are stuck in nursing homes, that are over the age of 75 or 80. Now I'm 77. I'm not afraid of this disease because I have a strong immune system. I know what to do to protect my immune system. And it isn't anything about wearing a mask or social distancing, believe me. So take some distress remedy and promote some clear thinking. Protect yourself with knowledge. Fear takes hold when understanding is weak. I have been teaching about immune health, about getting your body healthy, doing the right things, eating the right foods. 40 years. Why would I doubt myself now? So understanding viral infections. So what are viruses? Well, they're mostly opportunistic because they can't survive on their own. So if a virus is out there, it needs to get into mucous membrane to protect itself. So a virus on its own is going to die. That's why you expose it to sunlight, because sunlight destroys it within minutes. They have no life outside of another cell. So they need other cells in order to live. So once inside a cell, they hijack cellular processes that replicate DNA or RNA so that they are duplicated, causing disturbance of cellular function. Now we know that this COVID lives in the sinus membrane, the mucous membranes of the sinuses for 5 days, because during that time, it's replicating enough. It isn't until it gets down into the rest of the mucous membranes that it can start hijacking our DNA and replicating so that our immune system cannot identify it, because our immune system is in charge of what isn't self. Unless you're dealing with autoimmune, then it's not recognizing self from non-self. So what does that mean? Well, it means you can't kill a virus like you can kill bacteria. So the stuff about sanitation and all the soap is what it needs. Because why do you want to wash your hands with soap and water? Because that soap dissolves the virus. So you only need good soap and water to clean your counters off. You don't need Clorox bleach, or you don't need any of these harsh sanitizing things that they want you to. If it was a bacteria, yes, okay, but it isn't a bacteria. Try to understand the difference between a bacteria and a virus. A virus is microscopic. These cartoon spiky things that you see are replicas of a magnification of a virus that is 1,000,000 times magnified. You could fit 1,000 on the edge of a sharpened pencil. That's how small they are. So now look at your mask. Hold it up to your light. If you can see through it, it's doing you nothing. If you can breathe through it, it's doing nothing. So it makes no sense. The only reason they ask you to wear a mask is because they want you to understand maybe that will protect you from the fear. But they're the ones involved in the fear. So it makes no sense to me. And I always question and research when things don't make sense to me. So it enters the mucus, it surrounds itself, it duplicates in that mucous membrane until it can go down. And when it does this, it mutates into something just a little bit different. So vaccines aren't going to work. Right now, a flu vaccine is less than 50% effective. Well, you need a healthy immune system for a vaccine to work. And most of people do not have a healthy vaccine. So if it replicates like that and creates a slightly different thing, and the vaccine targets this first thing, it isn't going to be effective on these down here. What helps is zinc. Zinc protects against viral replication. So here are the mucous membranes, and the infection comes in. Now, what happens with these is you automatically want to get rid of it. Your body wants to get rid of it, and it does it through coughing, sneezing, clearing your throat, sinus drainages, runny noses. They're all part of the process. So make sure you stay hydrated. Drinking plenty of water, that you blow your nose quite often, that you flush out the irritants. Now you can do a neti pot and just every morning cleanse out the mucus and get rid of infections that way. You can use something that's steam inhalation. You can put things in it like silver, which really does go after viruses. It has a patent for that. So there's things you can do. So bacteria biofilm, that's this layer here, this it's only 1 cell thick. This is magnified immensely. Protects the mucous membrane. So if your biofilm is thin because you have allergies and you're taking things that thin the mucus, it may be affecting that biofilm. We want plenty of probiotics, so fermented foods, lactic acid, which inhibits the growth of harmful bacteria and fungi. They also compete with harmful organisms. So this is really important. One reason why you want to eat fermented foods on a daily basis and take probiotics. So zinc deficiency is quite common in the developing world. Even in the United States, about 12% of the population is probably at risk for zinc deficiency. It's not something that's tested quite often. And when we know as we age, it gets worse. So as much as 40% of the elderly are, because their diet isn't full of zinc, you need to be taking like pumpkin seeds and things like sunflower seeds that are high in zinc, that you do that on a daily basis. Oregon State University research Two studies recently published in the Journal of Nutrition and the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found significant levels of DNA damage both with laboratory animals and apparently healthy men. This was because men are lower in zinc than women, and women are lower in iron, especially if they're going through menses. Zinc is lost each time a man ejaculates. So they are lower in zinc regularly than female. And I will leave a link in the description below for this Oregon State University research. Now, there's lots of different kinds of viral diseases. There's, colds and flu and chickenpox and mumps and measles and herpes and smallpox. And the more vaccines you have riding in your system, the harder it is for a new vaccine to be recognized. So keep that in mind. So a family of viruses can cause illnesses such as common cold, severe acute respiratory syndrome, and Middle East respiratory syndrome. So that's where they get SARS from, is severe acute respiratory syndrome. So COVID is a SARS COVID, whatever year they want to attach to that. MERS is a Middle East respiratory syndrome, and there is an element in COVID that is similar to that. That's why a lot of people are ending up with pneumonia. So the new coronavirus is known as the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus. Now it's 2 for 2020. It was 2019 and they called it 19. So it keeps changing its name. So antibiotics don't work on viruses. Antibiotics only work on bacteria. Antibiotics are bacterial, and there are many that are bacterial resistant, like MRSA and SARS. Most coughs, sinus problems, ear infections, sore throats, and other contagious diseases are viral. And so if you have an ear infection, 90% of the time it's a viral, not bacterial. And there are no broad spectrum antivirals either in medicine or in herbalism. The most effective therapy for viral infection is provided by your own immune system. So a little about vaccines. They want you to put all your hope into this new vaccine that's going to be, when we see by the numbers that the deaths, unfortunately, the older people that were subject to it have died. They put them all in nursing homes together, those with COVID and those that were resident there, and they killed them with that terrible, terrible decision. They didn't give them vitamin C. When on the news have you heard, here's what you can do to protect yourself against this COVID? Naturally, you can't, because the news has been hijacked. Nobody can tell you about natural remedies. That's why it's so important for you to pass this information on to your friends and those that you love. Your work on it yourself with your community and become a community of strength, not weakness. So what they do in a vaccine is they take the virus, they weaken it so that you don't have full-blown whatever, and then they put all these adjuvants and preservatives and look into them. The particle of element of virus is minuscule compared to all the other ingredients that cause harm in a vaccine. Listen to Robert F. Kennedy and his view on vaccines. So this can work if the immune system responds properly to the vaccine, but the people they're testing this vaccine on have to be perfectly healthy. This test group is not the elderly. It is not the people that are dealing with diabetes and heart disease and the rest of the nation. These people couldn't have had a cold in a year. They couldn't have dealt with the flu in a year. They could not be overweight or obese. They couldn't be, I mean, it's unbelievable, this group of people that they chose to do this testing on. So it's great for the vaccine companies because viruses, and you know what? Even these healthy people are finding out that because of the adjuvants, they're getting sick. So I personally would not trust a vaccine. They'd have to tie me down and inject it. And then I know some of the things I would need to do. As soon as I got home, I would start detoxing like crazy. So fighting viral infections naturally and being prepared. Let's get into the positive aspects of this. But before we do, we have to discuss, why do the medical people feel that this is the best example? Well, first of all, there's two theories on germs. There's the germ theory, and it says germs are a direct and immediate cause of illness, that it's all out there. Nothing, I didn't do anything. Nope, not me. I eat ice cream every day and I have a terrible diet and I don't exercise. I never drink water, but it's not my fault that I got sick. No. So healthy tissue is attacked by germs and weakened. Now, anybody who does gardening knows that it's the weak plants that the bugs go to, not the healthy ones. So killing microbes will both prevent and cure disease. Do you realize that you live with 30,000 viruses every single day? That your body is comprised of bacteria, viruses, even parasites that are symbiotic. They're happy, you're happy, nobody's causing a problem. They're there for a reason. They keep things in check and balances. Probiotics are healthy bacteria. So you live with bacteria and viruses and fungi all the time to keep your body in check. They have a purpose. Now, here's another thing they say: the type of germ, virus, is important to decide therapy. Well, yeah, because look at diagnoses. If they don't know the exact thing, then they don't know the drug to give you. Well, our body doesn't work that way. Our body works that the germs are a secondary effect because the body is welcoming it. If you have a cold, you earn that cold. You lowered your resistance, you didn't sleep good enough, you were too stressed, and you weren't taking supplements to support stress. So you earned that cold. It's not my fault, it's your fault. And everybody has the personal responsibility for their own health. It isn't my responsibility to wear a mask to protect you. That's ludicrous. That is irresponsible of you. Now, tissues become weakened, which allows the germs to invade. So strengthen the tissues. Understand what does it take to be healthy. So strengthening the immune system, which you're not hearing on the main news because that's not part of their narrative. Oh, heavens no. Oh my goodness. Take personal responsibility when I can blame you. So let's talk about preventing infection. We know that washing your hands, because soap dissolves this virus. How simple is that? Maybe take a little bit of that soap and rub it into your nostrils. How would that be hard? And then flush with some water. Same thing with your face. For heaven's sake, they talk about goggles now. Who is like, you can't wash your eyes? You can very well wash your eyes. I wash my hands with soap, and with a little bit left on, I close my eyes and scrub my face and then rinse really well and pat dry. How hard is that? So then make sure that you're being responsible. I mean, you don't want to cough at somebody. You don't want to spit at somebody. Be responsible as far as that goes. And if you're sick, stay home. For heaven's sakes, the world will go on without you. So make sure your eliminative system we're going to go into a little bit about that all the channels of the elimination system are working properly, and eat good nutrition and make sure you have a healthy attitude. Don't buy into that mob mentality. Now, in your immune system, you have what's called macrophages. Now, these are like the immune Pac-Men. They engulf and digest cellular debris, bacteria, viruses, and other materials to eliminate them. You know what? They don't say, now, what kind of a virus are you? No, they just go in like, yeah, I'm probably dating myself, but do you remember the old game Pac-Man where they come along? It didn't say, what kind of virus are you? What kind of bacteria are you? No, they saw it. Hey, you aren't me. Boom, they ate it up. So they're present in large numbers in the mucous membranes, and they know enough to call upon other people when, I can't get rid of you. So then they call on backup from neutrophils, and these are called natural killer or NK cells from the bloodstream to assist in the process. So we have a perfectly managing immune system that takes care of us. So what are some natural remedies right off the top that everybody should know about? Vitamin A, C, and D, zinc, and selenium. Echinacea, which increases macrophage activity. So this is something you want to take early on. Maybe you want to take prophylactically. So you take echinacea every day. So it inhibits enzymes used by bacteria to break down connective tissue. So we don't want them to break down connective tissue or that biofilm we talk about. Astragalus. Astragalus is a fabulous herb. Oh my goodness. When we were in China, we saw these little children chewing on it. Looked like a tongue depressor. And it was slivers of astragalus. And while they were teething, they were chewing on this herb. It held back inflammation. It gave their body nutrition, because a lot of times when your teeth aren't feeling good, you don't want to eat. It is fabulous, and it helps to resist viral infection. Medicinal mushrooms. Now, these aren't magic mushrooms. These are medicinal mushrooms. I did a whole class on these. Cordyceps, reishi, maitake, so many shiitake. There's so many wonderful. They balance and regulate immune reactions to fight infections and reduce allergies and autoimmune reactions. So a lot of these, now there's a couple of mushrooms that are not good for autoimmune, but on the whole, these medicinal mushrooms are very beneficial. We have something in Nature's Sunshine that is in a powder form. You can mix it with anything. I mix it in my gravies and sauces, and I bump up our nutrition and supporting our immune system by doing regular food. So let's talk about vitamin A and B. So vitamin A strengthens the mucous membranes, making them more resistant to infection. Now the FDA has made it so that we can generally get only 10,000 units in a supplement because people's livers were so toxic that they weren't able to handle the breakdown. But you can get it in beta carotene form. But vitamin A in the oil form is what is going to protect that mucous membrane because these are oil soluble vitamins. Vitamin D3, it comes from like lanolin and that. So in particular, they strengthen the immunity and make a person less prone to viruses. Now, D3, if you go to the doctor, it used to be you had to beg for a D test, but now they're done pretty regularly. And if you're fighting infection, you want that level between 80 and 100, the NLMG level. So if you're in the 20s, which most people are, especially African American dark skinned people, have more difficulty absorbing D from the sun. And so they won't be able to do that conversion properly and it won't get into the blood. So you want it in the form of D3. So here, D comes from the sun, converts to D2 in the skin. D2 converts to D3 in the liver. And so you can bypass that whole process if you get D3, because then it can readily go into the kidneys and do the job. Now, D has over 400 functions necessary in the body. So the body depends on D for a variety of things, not just immune support, for healthy cellular structure, for bone health, for so many things. So like osteoporosis, it's generally a D deficiency, not always, but that's a good place to start. Get those D levels up. And generally people take 1 to 2, 4,000 IU tablets a day, and 1 to 2 vitamin A and D. Now you need D to absorb A, so that doesn't count as far as your D count. You need to count them separately. So now zinc, we talked a bit about this. And we've seen that if you do a zinc chewable, so it mixes with the saliva, because where does the virus spend mostly the first 5 days? Is in the head. So if you do the chewable, it will sublingually take up into the saliva and get it up into the head where it needs to go. So it stops the replication of the viruses. And they say that there is so vitamin E with selenium is a good choice. Now, if you take a good multivitamin, you can probably get all the things you need. Maybe you need to add D as a support. If you have eye issues, you might need to throw A in there. So, and there are huge amounts of studies on vitamin C, just huge. So vitamin C may be helpful for combating viral infections. Vitamin C is antioxidant and aids production. This doesn't mean orange juice. Come on, people. This, orange juice is so much sugar that you're defeating the purpose. This, I feel like rose hips, if you do like a rose hip tea, there's so many other ways to get vitamin C rather than orange juice. It's too glycemic. So high doses of vitamin C will help most with, so you want to do the ascorbic acid, vitamin C in this instance. I prefer a full spectrum of C with bioflavonoids and rutin and rose hips and these other components of vitamin C. So here we want to talk about the eliminative channels. Now we have the lungs, the kidney, the skin, and the colon. Now your colon is your primary eliminative organ. You know, most of your solids are going to be removed in the colon. A lot of the tissue breakdown, you know, cells die, and in that dying off process, then they need to go to the colon. You need good air and good food, which is your fuel. So you need to breathe in good oxygen. You need lots of water. You need fiber to help get that colon moving well. So the first thing I look at when I'm with a client is how do you poop? You know, what does it look like? How often? Do you struggle with it? Do you have to take something? Elderly people, the most thing they do is stool softeners. What they need is magnesium. So now there's different types of magnesium. You may want to do some research on that, but there's magnesium that, like oxide, that is directly helpful for the colon to relax. Now colons do this, and if they don't have enough magnesium, they stay in the spastic. What they need is magnesium to do this. Calcium does this, magnesium does this, and together, the calcium and magnesium do the job, pun intended. So cleaning out your colon is really, really important. And then, of course, the kidneys, drinking water, making sure you're flushing out those toxins. Now, if the kidneys and the colon are not working well, the next thing you'll see happen is lung congestion, because it can't get rid of that sticky mucus. And then you'll also see skin conditions. So if you're seeing skin and lung conditions, look to the kidneys and the colon. So cleansing the body is really, really important. If the lungs are congested, and I have this thing that I'm clearing all the time, and I'm taking stuff to help move it along. Part of it is that I don't exercise on a regular basis, and because moving is one way to get the mucus membranes working, your lymphatic system working. So sweat bath therapy, you can look into these things. Now, here's the thing. If your body has a fever, now they're going to come at you with this temperature thing. And if you read over 99, you may be eliminated from the place. But what we understand in good health is if you are in the 101 to 103, your body is dealing with that virus, and it's trying to burn it out. So help it. Run a hot bath with Epsom salts. Help your body sweat it out. And you may have seen, like in old films and that if the fever has burst, they know the person's on their way to being healthy. Now, if it goes over 103, you want to keep it cool. There's excess, 104, 105, not good. Now you're burning tissue. So you want to make sure that you're consuming lots of good hot teas and maybe even a hot toddy. Lots of good stuff flowing into the body. So are you prepared? That was the second part of this video. Being prepared is feeling better about what's going on. About 3 or 4 years ago, I did a class on preparedness. And it is really funny that we were so complacent. Maybe this viral thing is a wake-up call. Maybe it's what am I thinking? I can just run to the grocery store? No, because many of you ran to the grocery store to find empty shelves. So stocking up is a good idea. My husband and I have many things that we stock up on, but it isn't the same as hoarding. Hoarding is buying the shelves out and leaving nothing for anybody else. Buy what you need, buy what you're going to use, and use it. So if you rotate your stock, you're not hoarding. If you're using what you buy, you're not hoarding. So we understand a little bit better about natural disasters. Look at California, it's ablaze. The floods, there are things that we're dealing with that around the country, violence, and learning some procedures to help your family be prepared. Not that you're going to focus on this because that's negative. Feeling prepared is positive. So the first thing you want to assemble is a first aid kit. Now you can have, go out and buy a little first aid kit and it will have things in it like aspirin and, But what I'm talking about is in addition to some of these things are some nutrients that are going to help your body, maybe some distress, no, not maybe, definitely some distress remedy, definitely some good nutrition, and definitely some prepared foods that you can eat even when there's no electricity. So, I'm not going to go over all the things that are in the basic first aid kit that you can look into on your own. But some of the things that you might want to look into that you may not have is an enema bag or syringe. It's gotten so, now you used to be able to find these regularly in drugstores, but you might have to go online and buy one now because people they don't understand. Oh, an enema. But if you want to break a fever, an enema is going to do it instantly. Doing an enema helps to open up that channel of elimination, and it's going to help bring out the toxins and allow for the fever to break. It doesn't have to be horrible. It may be a little uncomfortable, but if you do it right, it's really no big thing. Within an hour, you can feel better. Now, how long does it take for aspirin to work? And maybe it doesn't work. And maybe what you're doing is actually drilling holes in your intestinal system and allowing bleeding to go through. So I'm not a fan of aspirin at all. The only thing I think aspirin should be around for is if in the midst of a heart attack, you chew it. That's the only time it's been proven to be effective for heart. It is not a thing you want to do on a daily basis because it's been proven it perforates and can cause bleeding, and then you end up with a stroke instead of a heart attack. Well, to me, that's no trade-off. So things that you may want to have, maybe you want to take those gloves and that face mask and stick them in your first aid kit. So, and there's hand crank radios that you can get, rubbing alcohol, hydrogen peroxide. Those are things that I think are important, but I feel that some of the things that you may not know about would be like the distress remedy, things to help you handle stress better, B vitamins like in the Nutricom. Capsicum will stop bleeding instantly. It also, there's been some research on putting some capsicum between your teeth and your lip. like those people that chew tobacco, stick it in there. But gently mixing it with saliva will stop a heart attack too. So that's a good thing to have on hand. Now you can do extracts. So you can pour the capsicum on a bleeding thing. Now I much prefer yarrow because yarrow doesn't sting like capsicum does. But if you have a wound that needs to be, you need to stop the bleeding because the person will bleed to death, doing capsicum will work. Lobelia. Lobelia rubbed on the chest here helps to open up the bronchioles. So if somebody's having trouble breathing, they can put some lobelia on the tongue and have them hold it there, and then rubbing it on their chest. And then when they're able to have a few drops in some hot water and sip on it, I've had people stop an asthmatic attack that way. Now, would I depend on that if I had a medical prescription? I don't think so. But I would start now supporting lungs with some good nutrition, like ALJ is a wonderful thing to support the lungs. Homeopathic arnica is a great pain reliever. Iodine is another thing that is good to have on hand. Pain, CBD is, as long as you don't have the stuff high in THC, if you're making it yourself, you have no idea what the THC levels are. But CBD is legal in most states, and it is a wonderful thing to help balance out the body, which is one of the reasons why the body is in pain, is because it's out of balance. IF relief is an herbal remedy that I used when I broke my ankle. I never used any Motrin or any of that stuff because I feel that when you do over-the-counter stuff like that, you are actually lessening the time of healing. So something just came to mind. Okay, this flatten the curve thing. So when you were advised to stay home and don't go to the hospital and all that, because they wanted to make sure the hospitals were available for the COVID patients that they thought, based on Dr. Fauci's model, that the hospitals would be overwhelmed with these people. And so a lot of people died of heart attack and things because they didn't want to overwhelm the hospitals. But when you flatten the curve, now if you've ever made cookies and you put them in a ball, you know that if you flatten them out, they're going to spread. So what did you do? When you flatten the curve, you spread the length of time that that virus hangs around. So what good did that really do us? You think about it. So curcumin is another one you can take on a daily basis to deal with chronic inflammation as well as acute. So there's other remedies. I take this elderberry defense on a daily basis, and when I feel something coming on, I'll go to the big guns like immune stimulator. And this my immune defense, that's the mushroom blend I told you about. It's wonderful. Or, I'll put links to these where they're available. Make sure that you have in your first aid kit an herbal laxative, because sometimes you just get bound up. Some of the food you ate too much cheese or bananas or whatever, and so taking a little cascara will help the peristalsis. High potency garlic is another thing to have in that kit. Really, really important. Or if you have dried raw garlic, you can do that. I'm going to do a whole class on these next week. I'm going to talk about the baker's dozen of foods that are never ending. And then the following week, I'm going to do a class on remedies to have on hand. So essential oils, tea tree, peppermint, Thai fu is, reminds me of the old Vicks Vapor Rub. Of course, Vicks is petrochemical, and you do not want to rub that on your body. You do not want to use Vaseline or Vicks on your body. This is a much better answer. And you can mix it with silver gel and make a rub. Fabulous. So I would have silver gel. I don't think it's listed on here. Activated charcoal is marvelous. Whenever I've had a case of diarrhea, seems to last more than 4 hours, I'll take a couple of activated charcoal and clear it right up. So these might be things you can consider. I would add actually lemon to this. Lemon essential oil, if you breathe it in, will stop a nosebleed like that. It makes things smell good. It's a very good antiseptic, lots of things. So to learn some local herbs by, there's lots of YouTube videos on foraging for herbs in your area. Right now, I could go out into my yard and pick 5 herbs that would help support better health. You know, there's plantain, there's dandelion. All parts of the dandelion are beneficial. There's so many herbs out there. I grow comfrey. Stinging nettle is often available. You have to be careful about picking stinging nettle. You want to go top down because the chemical that stings is the underleaf. Lemon balm, I grow that. It's fabulous. Mint grows everywhere. We have cleavers. They're like little Velcro. They stick on you like crazy. And burdock has those little things that if you have an animal and they come in with a burr, you know where to go for burdock. So elderberry and elderflower are great traditional folk remedies. That's why I take elderberry every single day. It supports the immune system and helps it to identify viral infections. It's a really, really good herb. In Europe, they make elderberry jelly. You know, there's lots of things you can do with the berry. For children, there's a great tea that you can make with the elderflower and mint. It inhibits herpes simplex. The research suggests it shortens the duration of a cold. And yarrow's wonderful, as I mentioned before. It can break down a fever. It stops bleeding. And you can also add it to peppermint for a great everyday tea or drink. And it's used often to help with sweat. Now, this is something grows all winter. If you have a cedar, now this is a white cedar, but all cedars have thuja. Look into that. Do some research on thuja. But you can make a tea with this, and it stimulates the immune system as an antiviral, and it helps with influenza. Isn't God good? I mean, look at this. Same thing with pine needles. If you have pine, now I use the white pine. We have, you know, sometimes called Scotch pine, but those long needles, cut them up, make a tea out of it. Extremely good for the immune system and full of vitamin C. So respiratory decongestant, and maybe I should go out and get some of that now. But it's the component in Vicks Vapor Rub. So it too is part of that Typhu. So use small doses of the tincture. So basic emergency preparedness, number 1, stay calm. You know, take your Nutricalm and your distress remedy. Think about shelter, clothing, how you can have things to make a fire, water storage, some way of purifying your water. There's a thing called a Berkey filter that you don't need any electricity. You can even put lake water in it and it will purify it. So, you know, 5-gallon buckets with a toilet seat and lined with plastic bag is, you know, makeshift toilet. So there's lots of things that you can think of to be prepared. but fear is a powerful tool of social control. That's why they want to keep you in fear all the time, because then they can control. And that's why people are out, oh yes, give me the virus. I want this thing to go over. Well, you know what? The virus is not going to end this energy of control. It's not going to be the answer. So don't trade in your freedom for a sense of security that is false. So don't listen to rumors, do your research, get the facts. You are not going to find facts and good research on the main media. They are hijacked and been sold out. So the awareness of, be aware that people have these preconceived ideas. The only thing you can count on is yourself and those who are into being prepared and have a positive mental attitude. They have a good faith. They keep up and they know what it takes to be healthy. They live simply. They don't extravagant. These aren't your entertainers. These aren't your football players. These are people right down honest. They grow gardens whenever possible. So there's something called the triple 440, 4 minutes of air. You can live up to 4 minutes without air. After that, you're starting to cause damage to the brain. That's why I won't wear a mask. I will not limit my ability to have good oxygen. You have 4 hours out in weather before hypothermia sets in. You can go 4 days without water. And you can go 40 days without food. Now, you may not want to, but your body has a mechanism where it can eat off the fat of the land, so to speak. And there's some basic supplies that you may want to have on. Bandanas can be used as a sling. They're just a really good thing to keep on hand. Emergency foods, you can buy some, but I want to talk about some foods that you can prepare yourself with a minimal amount of stuff, additives in it. And marysnest.com, this woman is fabulous. She has a 3-part video where she goes into how to prepare, what to do. And you can do it on a minimal budget. And she goes into if you have an apartment or a home that has storage area. A lot of people can just store stuff under the bed. There's, that can be your reserve, your survival kit can go under the bed. So there's lots of places there. I will put a link in the description below, but there's a lady that lives in a trailer and she has a year's supply of food that she rotates. So there are things you can do. You don't, if you live in an apartment and you can't garden, there are things you can do. You can go to farmer's market. Right now is harvest time. This is a perfect time to get out, get some stuff, start preparing. Food dehydration, oh my goodness. I dehydrated 3 pounds of green beans and it's stored in a pint jar. So it doesn't take a big area to store a good amount of food. So she's fabulous. I also did some classes on dehydration, on seed saving, because I, for one, was caught off guard. Normally I buy my seeds in January. Well, January, we took a trip to see our son in Boston and his family. And then in February, we went to a cruise, 2-week cruise, South America. I know it's tough. Somebody's got to do it. But anyways, probably the last cruise we're going to do for a long, long time. And they say that the cruise ships are going bankrupt because of this stupid thing, overreaction to COVID. And because people are relatively sick. They don't take care of themselves. They don't know how. We've relied on medical doctors and medical intervention much too long. We need to be self-sufficient, not dependent on drugs. And so our next series on first aid kit, and then some teas and tinctures and salves and creams, we're going to talk about a first aid, how you can start getting your first aid kit together. So I hope that's helpful. I will leave a link for my YouTube presentation on those. So other supplies to, you can look into that, but candles, my goodness, you should have candles. You should have matches and flashlights, and know where they are. So in conclusion, natural disasters happen. Those who prepare for them are going to be much better off than those that don't. And this is just part of a quotation by Rudyard Kipling. And he says, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, make allowance for their doubting too, if you could wait and not be tired of waiting or being lied about, don't deal in the lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. Read the rest of the quote. I'll put it in the description below. This is Dr. Mary for the health of it, and I hope that you share this video, that you have found some really good information in it. I know it was a little bit long this time, but I wanted to pack in a lot of information. Maybe you'll watch it again. If you want the transcript for this, I will be happy to send that to you in a PDF. Also, share, give me a thumbs up if you've liked it, and I thank you. Have a great day.